from MTN, the Montana Television Network. This is Face the State.
Well, good Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Chet Layman, and for the next half hour, we're going to chat about something very near and dear to not just Montanans, near and dear to virtually all of us in the United States, namely Yellowstone National Park, but we're going to look at it from a little different end. Let me introduce you to our guest this morning, Bates Kress from the Yellowstone Park Foundation. Karen, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chet.
Before we go any further, let's talk about Yellowstone Park Foundation, because that group, you've taken on a daunting task, to say the least. Let's talk about your organization.
All right. We were founded in 1996 to be what is called a Friends Group, as a technical agreement that we have with the National Park Service to be the fundraising partner for Yellowstone National Park. Can't get much better than that. The world's first park, the most iconic park, international visitors, national visitors, everything. So what we do is we raise money for projects that are park priorities given to us by the park, and we think we can raise money for them for significant programs, from wildlife research to archaeological digs to capital structures, trail restoration. And in the almost 20 years that we've been around, we have raised over $100 million for over 325 park priority projects. And we currently are in a capital campaign, $40 million, called the Yellowstone Forever campaign.
If you can, just take me, where would we be without that? I mean, people think of Yellowstone National Park, it's part of the Park Service. It's a government agency. They're government employees. It's all managed that way. That budget is voted on by Congress, and that's how things are paid for. Kinda. What would we be like in Yellowstone without that $100 million, Karen?
Let me just explain a little bit about philanthropy in the parks. It's been around for a long time. Way back in the early 1900s, a family gave land for Muir Woods, which became part of the National Park System. John D. Rockefeller, the Mellon family, and a lot of other people who are not quite as wealthy have given land, have provided services, have provided funds over the years. And probably in the last few years, I would think that many of the people listening today have heard about David Rubenstein, who calls it patriotic philanthropy and has been giving millions of dollars primarily to restore monuments in Washington, D.C. So it's not unusual. People love their parks, and people realize that the federal government cannot possibly cover all the costs, especially in a place like Yellowstone. So what we at the foundation do is we provide what we call a margin of excellence. So we fund above and beyond maintenance and operations. So for instance, Yellowstone National Park's operating budget that they get from the federal government, from Congress, is around $37 million. And then we add on to that. And then of course they have fees and other things, and I think their overall budget is probably around $90 million to operate Yellowstone. But if you look at the basic operations, last year we gave $8 million to the park, and that was almost 20% or more than, their operating budget.
Fundraising is a challenge. I'm not going to make that sound easier than it is, but when you're talking about fundraising for Yellowstone National Park, it belongs to me. You're asking me to fundraise for my own thing. That's got to be a nice feeling when you're going out there. This is what we want to do because it's mine. Yeah, you can have a little bit of it, but it's mine too. That's got to be a nice thing as your organization is trying to do this, whether you're working for fish or bear or safety rails or whatever it is you're working on. That's got to be a nice thing when you're starting that way. You don't have to sell the product.
That's true to an extent, but fundraising is always difficult.
Right.
And we've certainly run into people all the time who say the federal government should be doing what you're doing. We made a commitment to the national parks as a nation, so why is the federal government not funding all the things that should be done in the parks? And of course, it can't possibly do it. I mean, the backlog and facilities and stuff is huge. And the wildlife research, the wolf program, which started in 95, 96, we've been funding over 70% of that program because the federal government would never, ever be able to do the wildlife research that has made it, and it is a world-class program.
One of the programs that I was looking at while we were getting ready for this interview, Karen, is something I hadn't thought about, but what a great thing that you're doing for us. You're helping open up parts of the park that haven't been available for a while. I'm thinking of the projects that you're working on in the canyon area. The canyon's a fantastic place to go visit. There's trails and scenic overlooks and things like that that have been there for a while. Some of them I can't use anymore because they're a little less than safe. And when you're talking about the canyon of Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, you probably want to have safety. You're just going to make it easier for me to be able to come and do that. That's one of the projects the Foundation's working on.
It is. It is one of the signature projects as part of our campaign. It's probably going to be about a $10 million project for the foundation, and of course it will be more than matched by federal funding. And two efforts that are going to start this May, next month.
Right.
Inspiration Point and Brink of the Upper Falls, they're going to break ground on those. And as you mentioned, Inspiration Point is one of those places that has been closed for the last 3 years because it was crumbling and it was not safe.
Right.
And so we are funding that. In fact, ConocoPhillips, that was a founding supporter of the foundation, has given a $1.6 million grant to restore Inspiration Point.
Wow.
It's a pretty significant gift.
That's phenomenal. What a great thing that'll be. And so work ongoing on that as well. Another thing that I love that the foundation is doing is you're really looking to the future. And by that, I'm talking about your work with youth. And let's talk a little bit about the work that you're in the planning stages for here in the Mammoth area. Let's chat about that a little bit.
Well, in the Centennial year of the National Park Service, for sure, the younger generation, millennials, and also high school and students and elementary school students are really, really important as future stewards of the park system and parks, and particularly Yellowstone, which is a remote park. And so you don't get as many young people there as we would like to have. So we have been funding for years a program called Expedition Yellowstone, which reaches out primarily to gateway communities and to Native American reservations, to those students, to bring them into the park for a week. And it has a pre and post curriculum component. It's a very well thought through program and very exciting for students. And there's a number of other programs that we fund as well. We have one called Park Journeys, which brings students in from around the country, inner city students primarily, giving them an experience that they probably never would have had the opportunity to experience, and also has a kind of pre and post program, so it's ongoing. It's not like just bringing them into the park for 5 days and then saying goodbye and never working with these kids again. But the big project, the signature project for our campaign is a new Yellowstone Youth Campus, which would be used by the Expedition Yellowstone students, Park Journeys, by the Yellowstone Youth Conservation Corps, and it will be located in the Mammoth area, and it is going to be, we hope, a building that's called part of the Living Building Challenge, which is more than LEED certification, which has been the standard for sustainability with buildings. It's more than that because it involves a lot more things, such as if you're looking at water, so it would recycle gray water, which is, dishwashing water and that kind of thing, even perhaps black water, which is the dirtiest of water, and then also rainwater, collecting rainwater and reusing that water in the facility. So that's an example of what a Living Building Challenge building would be doing. It's the epitome of environmental sustainability in a building.
The beautiful thing about that, though, where you're doing all of that work with the building is you're making Yellowstone even more personal. By bringing it to the young people, what you're doing with your education programs and having this facility ultimately there, that changes the way a lot of us have seen the park. When most of us, you hop in your car and you drive through the park and you see the bison, or you stop at the bears, or you go and watch Old Faithful go off regularly, or do whatever it is you're going to do there, it's very personal because you have all of those memories from it. But the work you're doing with the youth makes it even more personal because they're taking a little different stake in it. That's an investment in a different kind of future. That's a smart thing. I love that.
So the building will be a teaching building. They can go back to their communities, back to their families, and say, look, we saved all this water. We saved all this energy by being in this building for a week or so, and we can help bring that back to our communities, making great young stewards.
In Yellowstone. I mean, that you can't undersell that any
Right.
better as a young
Right.
person to have the ability to see all of that in the First National Park. How exciting to be on the beginning edges of that.
It is very exciting.
Fundraising is ongoing for that?
Yes, we have just started. The building is not going to break ground. They're not going to break ground until May 2017, excuse me. Yes, we are actively raising money for it. We've just started, so we've raised about $2 million, but we have lots of proposals pending.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. So I have time to get my resume in if you're wanting to teach
Yeah,
a video
that's
class
okay.
or something like that. So
There
I
you
can spend
go.
a little time there. I
Absolutely.
don't fit into the youth part of it any more than that. Let's talk about some of this other work. We had touched on the wildlife for a little bit there, but the work that the foundation has done, it links with the education that we're talking about here. I'm thinking about the so many different projects you have with bears, and we're not just talking about grizzly bears. We're talking about black bears and all of that. There is so many different projects that the foundation is currently working on and going through that. Let's talk a little bit about some of those if we can.
So we're funding some really interesting research in the park. Clearly, grizzly bears are part of it, you know, elk predation and all of that. But there's also work being done on black bears, so it's kind of the whole system of bears in the park. And so some of the research that's being conducted, they have this great camera and a GPS thing that they're collaring bears with. And they actually have video, like 20-second videos of bears feeding on various things. So they're finding out that bears, you know, they feed on like 360 different kinds of plants and animals. It's not that they're just herbivores or they're carnivores or whatever, it's a combination. So the park is doing incredible research on this, which will help, you know, across the country where there are bears. And then in addition to that, I'm trying to recall the name of it, but I can't right now. But
The part I know, I've covered the interagency grizzly bear meetings. They talk about the grizzly bears. They've been very studied in that. But it's got to be a nice feeling for you and your organization to know that you've helped change some of that research, like you're talking about with the GPS collar trackings. That 20 years ago we weren't able to do that.
No.
We had an idea we could follow some tracks and we could do some, you know, the antennas and the radio collars out there. But the work that you're doing with that research is much clearer and it gives us a better picture. That's got to be what a reward on your end of that to be a part of helping make that happen, because without it, it doesn't.
it's true. And all the wildlife research study that we have funded is very rewarding. We just finished, the park just finished a raptor study, a 5-year raptor study that has been significant. We're funding a cougar study. We're funding brown bat research. I mean, it goes on and on. We're funding, you know, probably almost all of the wildlife research in the park. And it is very rewarding because people love to come and see the wildlife. And you want them to be healthy. You want them to have a healthy habitat. And you know, the Park Service has this dual mission, protect and preserve the resources, at the same time providing a quality visitor experience for the enjoyment of the people. So there's always trying to have that balance. And so another program that we fund is visitor and wildlife safety. So for instance, the bear jams, we call them, or the wolf jams, so the traffic jams in the park that are created when a wolf is near the road or a bear is near the road or crossing the road. But the important thing about that is to get the visitor to understand that they can't just hop out of their car and take a photograph. You know, you have to be very careful. These are wild animals. So we do fund seasonal rangers. And of course, because visitation is increasing, you know, we're going to be funding more seasonal rangers to help take care of these wildlife traffic jams.
Explain to me what that is, a seasonal range. What capacity would they be serving in that?
Well, they serve more as an education and also protection. They protect the visitor and the wildlife because, you know, it's harmful to the wildlife if a visitor gets too close, and it could be very harmful to the visitor if a bear gets too close. So they're out there protecting people and protecting the wildlife and also educating people about why, these animals are wild in this situation and why you can't get closer, et cetera.
You touched on a subject that's going to be something that Yellowstone's going to be dealing with, and I'm sure the foundation is going to be tackling, is the park is not getting less experience. Every year the numbers continue to go up. We saw record years last year on top of record years before that. Where do you see the foundation fitting into that, Karen? Because obviously you're going to be called, your organization's going to be called in to help with some of that as these numbers continue to grow and all the fun that comes with that.
You are absolutely correct. We expect to be receiving proposals from the park in this next proposal cycle, which will be the end of this year, on how the park can fund surveys and gathering data and that to help identify what they can do as far as park staff to deal with the situation of increased visitation. For instance, last year, it was not a quality experience for a lot of visitors. There were miles of traffic, parking was unavailable, and there were a lot of not happy visitors. And so the park knows they have to deal with it. And actually it's a national problem because many units of the national park system are having the same problem. And it is primarily the larger significant parks that are having the problem. So actually we have a really strong corporate partner called Michelin North America, the tire company. They've donated tires up to $125,000 a year for years and do some other things. And we're working with them, starting to work with them right now on a significant project that with the new canyon lodges and the restoration being done at canyon overlooks and trails, trying to figure out if there's a way that we could test some interesting things to control traffic and reduce traffic congestion and parking, et cetera. So there's a lot going on. The park has hired a social scientist to help deal with this issue, and he is actively starting surveys, and a lot of work is being done in the park.
It's changed a lot. We're celebrating the anniversary this summer, all summer long, of the National Park Service. Yellowstone was the foundation of that, literally. It was where we started with all of that. That isn't going to help. There's going to be a lot of people coming for that. I mean, this year is going, you put that anniversary right at a really challenging time. I didn't say you put it there, but that's where it falls. It just makes things even more interesting.
So August 25th,
right?
The peak month of the year, 1916 is when the Park Service was founded. And so the celebration is occurring all throughout this entire year. So things like National Geographic, every issue of the magazine is going to have something on the national park system. The May issue is all about Yellowstone ecosystem and with a heavy emphasis on the park. Very significant. We're all very excited about that issue. But there are a couple of big programs that the National Park Service has come out with. One of them is called Find Your Park. And so the over 400 units of the National Park System, and they're really trying to get people to go to the lesser used parks. Find the park that's closest to you. But of course, some of the bigger parks like Yellowstone are kind of saying, find your park, maybe it should be find another park. Because right now with increased visitation, it's been pretty significant impact on the park. Another program that they're funding through the National Park Foundation is every fourth grader in the park. So every fourth grader in the country can get into a park free, and of course in the case of a park like Yellowstone where you just don't walk up and pay for one person, it's a vehicle, so their whole family will get in free.
I love that program. I think that's great. I'm a big fan of bringing the young people into the park and doing that. That is exciting for me to see that part of it. This celebration that's happening, though, you're going to be a part of it. I would think the foundation is going to be a big part of that.
We are going to be a part of it, but the event for Yellowstone is going to be in Gardiner at the Roosevelt Arch entrance, the northwest entrance to the park. There is a community group in Gardiner who has been working significantly, one, to get some of the funding with the transformation that's going on in Gardiner and along in front of Roosevelt Arch. And so they are really taking the lead on this, and the Park Service. And then the foundation is going to be involved because we are charged with raising $2.7 million to help do this transformation on the park side. And so there's going to be new signage, there's going to be a plaza, they're restoring the portals at the Arch, there's going to be a small amphitheater, and we're funding all of that. And right now we've raised about $2 million of the $2.7 million. And we're going to have an incredible opportunity. We do have an incredible opportunity for donors to have not only support a terrific project, but to also have donor recognition in the park. So we're going to have stones with people's names and geographic location at the $10,000, $25,000, $50,000, and $100,000 levels. And then we have a couple that have made $1 million gift to the project. So we're actively fundraising for this because we know that that's where the event is going to be for the Centennial.
That Gardiner Gateway project has always struck me as interesting because that's how you used to get into the park. You'd ride the train, take the stagecoach, zip in through the Arch, and then people went to cars, and we never really changed it after that. And now you've got these 40-foot motorhomes trying to make the corner and all of that. We went from stagecoach, made a nice transition to automobiles, but we really haven't transitioned to that transition is coming, isn't it?
It is coming. Yep, that transformation is coming. And so the amphitheater and, creating a better looking Arch Park right there by the Arch, and then the transportation is being changed. It's going to be one way through the Arch and one way out of another section. And just the walkway, everything it really is a huge transformation.
It's going to be beautiful. I can't wait to see how that's all going to go on. We also have celebration. I know that mentioned in here, the Yellowstone Lake Hotel celebrating a bit of a milestone, 125 years on the bank of the lake down there. That's an exciting time for the park.
It is very exciting for the park. And Xanterra, the park concessionaire who runs the lodging in the park, had totally restored and renovated the Lake Hotel 2 years ago, and some still continuing last year, in time for this 125th anniversary. So there's going to be a fantastic celebration and a gala event and events for, I think, probably 2 days. Very significant. I wanted to go back to the Arch, though.
Yeah, no.
So that evening, there is going to be a program called Evening at the Arch. And there are going to be some musical artists. And right now, I understand that Alison Krauss has committed. And there's going to be a lot of things going on August 25th.
That's fantastic. Are they all part of the celebration that's going on?
It is all part of the celebration.
I asked you before we started this, Yellowstone, do you ever get a chance to visit this? When you go to the Yellowstone, do you see it differently? I mean, because you spend so much time, your organization spends so much time working on these projects and these projects. Do you just roll the windows down and let your hair blow as you arrive? I mean, do you get a chance to actually experience the park as a park, or can you separate yourself from work? It sounds really exciting to work in Yellowstone, but it's still your job. Do you get a chance to escape that?
I do occasionally, yes. My husband brought me to Yellowstone in 1981, and I fell in love. I mean, I was done for. We came out every year. Right. We bought property in '89. We built a house in the early 2000s just north of the park. And then this job came open, and my whole background has been nonprofit work, and it was like, I can't believe I get to raise money for my favorite place in the world. Right. So yes, I do spend personal time in the park. We fish, we hike, we don't backpack anymore. We view wolves, we can't wait to see wildlife, and so yes, I do. But it's not as much as I would like, but I'll be retiring soon, and I'll have a lot more time to do that.
Well, that's fantastic. I love to hear that. The part that's always fun for me and reading about all the work that the foundation always does, there's such diversity of what you can do in the park. You touched on some of that there. I like to ride my bike. If I left this interview, we could go do that. It's about time to close that up and open it up for cars. You can backpack, you can fish, you can finding those projects. There's so many different ways to experience it. Some people go to the park and they just want to look at bison. I'm not going to do anything other than look for a wolf. I'm not going to do anything other than go to Old Faithful. When I go, my favorite place to go to the park is the Norris Geyser Basin. I go there. It used to be the less people. They're not quite that way anymore, but that was my favorite place to go. When you go to look at these priorities and these projects that are coming around, and you drive around and your folks are looking at the park, how do you make that list? Because there's so many different ways you can be involved, and you are involved in so many different ways. How do you narrow that down, though?
Well, we have a process.
Right.
And so the superintendent and the assistant superintendent of the park request proposals from their staff, and then they get filtered by the superintendent and the assistant superintendent as into what proposals they're going to submit to the foundation. And then the foundation has a formal grant process. We have a grants committee of the board, and we have staff that work on this. And we review all of the park proposals. And one of the things that we have to do is determine, can we raise money for this?
Right.
I mean, there's no reason for us to say we're going to fund a proposal the park gives us, and we know we don't have any donors that would ever have any interest in it. So that's one of the criteria we look at. We also make sure that it's not a maintenance and operations, that it has to be that in that what we call that margin of excellence.
Right.
So we have a filter through which we look at all of these proposals, and then we tell the park what we think we're going to be able to fund this year.
One of the projects that you've helped with for a long time isn't as glamorous as hand railings and new steps and things like that, but it's hugely important, are those bear boxes that are at campgrounds and things like that. They're dull looking, brown, you have to know where they're at, and they're fairly rectangular, they're not much to look at. But a huge project that you've been able to change how camping in the park goes because of the work you've done there. That's got to be kind of fun to do that, but
it is.
Not the glamorous fundraising for like a hand railing at the...
But you know what? People love those bear boxes. Now, one of the reasons they may love them is because they can have a plaque with their name there saying that it was donated by them, and we let them know precisely in which campground and where that bear box is. So people love that because they get some recognition for their gift, but at the same time, they're doing good. But it's been a very successful project for us. In fact, we committed, I think, to raise like $80,000 this year, and we've already met that goal.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I've watched some of the young people who come into the park help put those in place, and that so that project helping
so the
other projects.
Thank you. Yellowstone Youth Conservation Corps, who are the 15 to 18-year-old high school students who come in for 4-week sessions, two groups a year. They are responsible for a lot of trail restoration, but they also have been putting the bear boxes in the campground. So it was a great experience for them too.
A little education. Do you have to explain to people who aren't from around here what a bear box is? Because you're not putting a bear in it.
Well, I think most of them.
No bears go in the box, right?
No bears go in the box.
Right.
Just bears trying to get into the box to get food, but they can't.
Right.
And so it's to prevent, it's really another wildlife and visitor safety program. You're preventing the visitor from being harmed by a bear going after their food, because their food is protected in the bear box, and you're also helping the bear not be harmed by the people in charge who would be upset if it was raiding people's campgrounds, because it'd probably have to be removed and placed someplace else. So it's a great program.
Well, that's perfect. Again, Karen Bates Kress joining us from the Yellowstone Park Foundation, talking about the work that her group is doing and will continue to do for forever, I'm guessing.
You got it.
All
Yellowstone
right.
forever.
Yellowstone forever. Karen, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us for Face the State.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.